Hi, everyone, and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host, Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discuss today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you help us please get the word out about this podcast to other enthusiasts, subscribe, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Lei. I'm the managing director at Sino-Auto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.substack.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Almost ready to go back to the United States, Lei.
Yeah.
Can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning to a just recently returned to the U.S. too, and good morning from myself about to be returned to the U.S. Lei, live from Beijing. This is your co-host Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review, and this is episode number 171. Porsche needs a hug. We start from there, and we kind of talk about the uphill climb, or maybe further decline of the foreign legacies. And this is everybody. I mean, we've seen some horrendous numbers come out for June and the first half of the year.
And Lei, I think it's important to note that media is starting to pay attention not only to Chinese exports, but to your point just now, how bad foreign legacies are doing in the China market. So there's this double whammy that media are starting to really pick up on, Western media, I mean. And so you're starting to see negative numbers in more mainstream news outlets that aren't as focused on the China market. So it's becoming fairly well known about the downward spiral and the upward trajectory, the downward spiral of the legacy automakers and the upward trajectory of the Chinese EV makers.
Yeah, and there's all in the backdrop of, I tweeted that we're nearing another tipping point, that tipping point being 50-50 NEVs versus ICEs. We're almost about to pass that threshold, at least on a monthly basis, right? In June, the CPCA numbers was 48.4% retail, percentage of vehicles sold, passenger vehicles sold that were NEVs. We're on a cusp, right? And while at the same time, you're seeing this Chinese brands accounting for roughly 60% of the passenger vehicle market. And before, it was the other way around, right? It was 60% foreign brands. So two switches being flipped, right?
And this, along with the foreign automakers collectively, now we're talking Volvo, Mercedes, BMW, Hyundai, Honda, Toyota, in the United States, outselling the U.S., or not outselling, outproducing and manufacturing the U.S. 3 in the U.S. market. So a lot of firsts are going on all over the world in the transportation space.
Yeah. And GM and Stellantis getting that, what?
I think it's $1.7 billion.
Yeah, including some other, companies. But it's just, I mean, this downward spiral.
Well, let's talk about a specific example. You had mentioned that Porsche needs a hug. So I'll start with a statistic, and then you continue about what's going on recently. Because in 2023, Porsche sales globally increased by 3%, but in the China market, it actually decreased by 14 or 14.5%, close to 15%. So Porsche entered the China market in 2001. A quick reminder, Porsche does not manufacture anywhere else in the world except for Europe, mostly in Germany. And so they export everything to the China market. 15% was the first sales decline ever for Porsche in the China market. And what happened this week, Lei? How did their sales do for the first 6 months of 2024?
Down a third to less than 30,000 units in the first half. So it's significant because Porsche was nearing about 100,000 units a year in China at the peak. I think that was 2022 or 21.
Yep.
So that's. I mean, if you look at all of the regions, China stood out because it was the biggest fall. Other regions are actually still growing. Europe, the U.S., right?
So the
Uh,
funny thing is, in the Western media and Western charts and financial statements, red numbers are bad, but in China, it's black numbers that are bad, negative. So
yeah,
that's kind of
it's
the
green
weird
versus
thing.
red.
Yeah, exactly. And so I look at it, Lei, as the Volkswagen Group management had anticipated sales to continue to decline, but I can't imagine that they thought it was going to be 33%.
Yeah, I think there are quite a few factors behind this. So if we trust what Porsche says in the official press release about the model changeovers, which in fact are happening, number one, and then two, the Taycan demand falling. Also, the Taycan itself is in a refresh. But I think the other important thing with respect to China is the realization of the sales and the market environment. I think also because the dealer revolt that happened a few months ago, I think it's just a matter of pushing the inventory into the dealerships. I think that's probably stopped, or I think they have entirely new expectation of a sale. So this value over volume thing is, I don't know, just trying to be realistic with the market. I think they're they'll be content. I think even with the expectation a little bit higher than what the actual situation is, I think they'll be content with what has transpired. And it's too bad. It's just, you know,
So, really quickly, to create more context and kind of a better understanding of how how Porsche performs globally, I think they were close to 360 or 370,000 units in 2023 for global sales. 150,000 of those units were Macans and Cayennes. So they're high runners are
SUVs. Yeah.
SUVs. And Macan EV was unveiled last year or earlier this year for the China market. But, I'd written in this week's newsletter that just 4 or 5 years ago, Porsche, Cayenne, and Macan didn't have a number of competitors that are currently in the market on the clean energy or EV, PHEV side. So what they're experiencing right
Yeah.
now, even if we assume that the Taycan and the changeovers were partially to blame for some of the sales decline, it can't explain 15%, a negative 15% and a negative 33%. And we have to look at the competition and the choices that are available to Chinese consumers. A couple Neo, Li Auto, Avatar, Xpeng to a lesser extent, all these Lotus, Volvo, Polestar, you name it, man.
I tweeted out the Zeekr's first proper SUV, the 7X, is a blank. I was trying to say it's a Macan killer. One of the Macan killers,
one
at least.
of, because
One of,
if you
right?
squint,
So,
if you squint, they all have the same silhouette. Because to me, that Zeekr 007 looks a little bit like a G6, an Xpeng
yeah.
G6.
And right, this is the premium. And then we talk about, I also tweeted about the Chevrolet being done because Skoda and Chevrolet, I think, are two brands that are about to have their judgment date in China. I think Skoda already did because recently I think it was hinted that all of their distribution is now integrated into the Volkswagen
Right.
dealerships. So there are no, right. That's one sign. And then Chevrolet, right? I mean, selling less than 10,000 units in a quarter is, I don't know what the word to use. It's ugly. It's
And I don't know how
it's
many.
embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
I'll find this out for next week, but I don't know how many dealers there are. But it is not something that it should be very concerning in Detroit. Let's just say that. The one silver lining, because you had tweeted about the Chevrolet sales earlier this week, I retweeted it with a few of my own comments. The one silver lining is potentially the PHEVs that were launched or unveiled at the Beijing Auto Show that Chevy had shown. But
Yeah, I don't know, man.
yeah, they're definitely not going to be the saviors for Chevrolet. And what we've said in past episodes is that Cadillac is now Buick, Buick is now Chevrolet, Chevrolet is in no man's land because
Is irrelevant, right? So
yeah, they play in the 200, 300,000 RMB price point where every single, what it seems like, every single Chinese EV brand lives. And so the number of options that you have, if you're able to pay 300,000 RMB for a passenger vehicle in China, is in the dozens.
yeah, yeah. And then the Japanese they're all down. Haven't seen the Korean brand numbers. Probably the same.
ABB's down.
Yeah, the Beamers, the Mercs are still on a 700,000 unit a year trajectory, but I think among the ABBs, from what I'm hearing locally, is that the price cuts on the Merc side is a little bit less than what's happening at the BMW and Audi side.
I heard the same thing.
I was trying to maintain that kind of the premium value, or but
it should be noted that Mercedes and Audi, the lion's share of their sales is still ICE. BMW's EV sales are growing in the China market, but only after fairly significant price cuts. And
all of their EVs are there's significant discounts.
Yes.
Maybe half off in some instances at the dealer.
And if we think about that, Lei, if something used to cost $10 and people bought a lot of them, and now you can't barely sell them for $5, and we're talking premium, okay?
Yeah.
And we should also point back to the tweet that you had talked about, the Audi factory, the first one in Europe,
Brussels,
that builds the Audi e-tron, the Q8,
the OG,
is
the original,
looking at closing.
Yeah.
So that's how significant the lack of demand, the challenges that are created when the lack of demand is sustained through several quarters. Normally in a capitalistic market, but because we're in China, there's SOEs involved. The companies that we think should be going away have not yet.
And speaking of, right, these are the dynamics that Xiaomi just recently yesterday getting their MIT production license. I tweeted that someone worked the magic because no one has gotten the license this fast, 3.5 years after Xiaomi announced the EV entry. While at the same time, China is trying to control production licenses. So you wonder, somebody getting the favor, so these are still happening. And we talk about consolidation and how long it takes at the national level, at the regional level, at the provincial level, local level, right? There's so many interests involved.
And there's this dichotomy. The central government wants to limit manufacturing licenses, but at the provincial level, they want more manufacturing licenses because it normally means more jobs. Now, they have to pick and choose who they want to back, and it's with the current track record of the Xiaomi SU7, it looks like giving them a manufacturing license will actually pay off. And so I think that's also was maybe a factor. The sustained demand of the SU7 kind of proved out a bit of Xiaomi's potential longevity.
Yeah, and they're also building a second plant right next door. So
and that's the crazy part, Lei, because you and I know, at least on the ICE side, there's a lot of overcapacity in China, and they're not going to get the types of incentives, they as in EV startups and SOEs that want to build new EV brands, they're not going to get the bang for their buck if they try to convert ICE factories into EV factories. They get the significant tax cuts and subsidies if they build new. And so that exacerbates the overcapacity issue.
Yeah, and speaking of bang of the buck, the bigger background is the current economic situation in China. And this trip coming back, I said myself being local and kind of observing what's happening. This bang for the buck is happening in every industry imaginable. I tweeted that the China burger in a burger group of this is happening in the food industry, in the EV industry, let's see, in the malls. There's a bunch of these new, let's say the coffee shops, tea shops opening up. My wife was just talking about cosmetics, that people are willing to pay a little bit less for cosmetics than the brand names, right? These are things going on about kind of the consumption downgrade. It is true. It is happening. And so that combined with I guess the new generation of consumers, they don't have this brand loyalty. Let's say as my wife, my wife grew up in the 80s and 90s crazing for McDonald's when they were first opened in Beijing, right? The new generation, let's say my daughter's age, they don't have that.
What's really important to also kind of explain is that 10 years ago, and then in 2008 and 2009 during the financial crisis, what the United States and China did was they created policies to invest further into infrastructure, into bridges and things like that. And I think some policy or economists are looking at China, the Chinese government, to do something similar. But the denominator is much larger now, meaning that the Chinese economy is much larger. So the same amount of investment, which in 2008 and 2009 was very significant. I want to say it was close to $1 trillion or something like that. But so the same amount of investment that they had in 2008, 2009 would not have the same effect if they invested that same amount today. And so because the denominator is bigger, the economy is larger. And in the same vein, if the economy is slower, it's going to take a lot more effort to get it back to the growth rate over 5%. I actually think that the days of 5-6% are probably over. Most countries would still die to have a 4 or 5% growth rate. But for the Chinese economy, it means that things aren't as active and growing as you're pointing out to with this downgrading.
Yeah. And I also do see a trend, if you look at the CAAM numbers, of the share of exports in the NEVs. The growth, I think, is slowing down, while domestically, China is pushing very much on that cash for clunkers program. It's over 10 billion RMB put into it, national and the regional level. If you're trading or scrap your old vehicle, you automatically get 10,000 RMB toward a purchase.
Because they want to keep these factories running.
Yeah. So that's pretty serious. And if you look at in Beijing, this construction project, there's this Jingmilu. There's this high elevated highway being built right on Jingmilu. Right, these are the investment and into infrastructure that's still happening.
But again, in 2009, it might have taken 10,000 of these investments, and I'm making that number up. I have no idea if it's accurate or not. It might have taken 10,000 to stimulate the economy, but now it would take a lot more than 10,000 of these projects. So,
and everyone's looking forward to next week's plenary session. Starts on Monday.
I know we do this every year, but can you explain to folks what the third plenum is?
Well, it's basically kind of they give out direction or, where in terms of economically, some of the directions of what, let's say everybody's expecting some kind of a major stimulus.
Right.
Let's just say that to come out. And it's mid-year, right? Given the kind of the economic pressure, and everybody's seeing, what's China's going to do.
So, Lei, let's shift gears. BYD is investing.
I know you had said about BYD everywhere, but I don't know if you want to go there. But
so there was an announcement that BYD is going to invest $1 billion in Turkey. And
Turkey! I mean, come on, Turkey announced the tariffs, right? The 40% tariff on every kind of vehicle from China. And then after this, I think they scrapped it or
Yeah.
something.
So, well, so it's not just the number of countries that BYD is going to be manufacturing. Let's look at so they're in Thailand, Brazil, Hungary,
Hungary, yeah,
Turkey,
Mexico,
Mexico,
Turkey, right?
and so, but there's a reason that I think it's significant that they chose Turkey, because if you look on a map, Turkey is kind of equidistant. I won't say equidistant. That's probably not the right word. I would say it's central to Europe, central to Africa, central to the Middle East, and some of the other
Yeah,
Asian countries. And so it creates a lot of flexibility from a manufacturing standpoint in case Africa increases demand or the Middle East increases demand. Now they can shift some of that and they don't have to ship it on a boat. You know, it's much easier. And if nothing else, they go to the EU. So this particular factory, I think, stands out to me because it seemed much more strategic, not only because Turkey announced tariffs, but because it looks like it could supply a lot of different countries from that Turkey factory. So I wouldn't be surprised if they put a battery factory right next to this assembly plant in Turkey, because $1 billion is a pretty significant investment. So
yeah. So geographically speaking, it's probably the most strategic, maybe next to Mexico, of where the plant is being built.
yep. You know, in Mexico, I would expect that for the first several years, plug-in hybrids are probably going to be the dominant product that's going to be manufactured, unless they decide to shift supply into the United States. And then I could see battery electric vehicles being a decent amount of their manufacturing. But, you know, for Turkey, it just makes a ton of sense if you look at it on a map. For those that aren't great in world geography, because I wasn't, I needed to look on a map. It sticks out to you that Turkey's in the middle of all these different regions. So
Yeah, it's like the middle of all the continents, basically. Yeah, Europe, Asia, and Africa.
one of our friends, Stephen Dyer, he works for Alex Partners. They had done a brief and said that of the 137 brands that are currently selling in the China market, only 19 will be profitable by the end of the decade.
2030 was it?
Yep, 2030.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that sounds like a lot to me, but I thought it might be even less. But so I just wanted to throw out that statistic because people are always kind of wondering. I think they have no idea, but according to Alex Partners, there's currently 137 brands, and so I think the implication that that these statistics or this prediction of 19 being profitable also implies that there won't be 137 by the end of the decade.
Well, 19 being profitable doesn't mean that there'll only be 19 brands left, as we talked about the slow consolidation
Right.
happening.
And it doesn't have to be consolidation. We can just look at Stellantis and Volkswagen as cash infusions in licensing IP. So strategic partnerships, I think, are also going to be a way to go. And if you're a foreign legacy looking to find a Chinese strategic partner, I would rather pick one sooner than later, because it's not going to be the prettiest girl towards the end of the dance. It's going to be the leftover EV companies that probably aren't as attractive. So I think that's why Volkswagen and Stellantis were quick to pick the two partners that they did.
Yeah, yeah.
So, man, do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
I don't know. You want to talk about a little bit about the robotaxi headlines?
Yeah. Why don't you?
There's been
What happened with Baidu?
What happened with Baidu is so there's been a few incidents or accidents, not to the Baidu's fault, but it shows kind of how far we're still away from that utopia. First of all, AVs are safe. First of all, they abide by traffic rules, right? 60 kilometer an hour it'll go at 60 kilometers an hour. So there's been a few incidents that have become viral on Chinese social media. And part of it becoming viral is because of these headlines saying, oh, the AVs are taking over the jobs of taxi drivers. And misinformed headlines saying that there's 1,000 robotaxis in Wuhan. The 45% of the all ride hailing are these AVs. These are all wrong takes.
Yes.
And I think the bottom why this is becoming viral is not many people talk about this, is actually the poor, the really traffic management in Wuhan. That's what the local citizens are complaining. And now the robotaxis, when they're stuck on the road and they cause traffic, it's everything, I think, is blown out of proportion. So that's why it's becoming viral.
So we should note, though, Lei, that I think it was almost too sterile. There was no reporting of any accidents by robotaxis, and we know that not to be true. The more robotaxis are on the road, there could be minor accidents, and they should be reported. But I think the other reason it sticks out is because there's just been this lack of transparency on some of that stuff before. So
and I mean, my personal view is this: I've recently done I tweeted I've done the Yizhuang Daxing Airport rides on all three platforms: Baidu, WeRide, and Pony. Comfort or whatever aside, I think currently the AVs, they're still at a stage where everybody's competing to show the capabilities of the AVs being able to transport you with or without the safety drivers. The ability to transport you from point to point in a bigger area, bigger ODD. That's it. I think from a business model perspective, from being profitable perspective, from the perspective of AVs are taking over the jobs of the taxi drivers, cab drivers, it's still decades away, I believe.
Well, the other important thing that should be noted is that most of these AV companies in China haven't IPO'd. So it's important that they try to stay squeaky clean in order to maximize or optimize these valuations when they do IPO.
Yeah. And then having said that, is Baidu, the Luobo Kuaibao, are they responsible? I think so, in terms of the processes of what happens during certain, it's not 100% everything goes smoothly, right? It should be a learning experience for them to be, better process at taking care of these incidents or issues. But it's great to see this technology progress, but Baidu said in the Q1, I think cumulatively 6 million rides since like 2020. And some of the headlines said, oh, over the last few months, Baidu has done like 5 million rides. Right? So yeah.
And I think it is important, Lei, that we understand what these AV companies, how their reactions are going to be, what their responses are going to be, how transparent they're going to be when there is an accident, because we see in the US market, at least in Tesla's case, there seems to be a lack of transparency and understanding. Part of acceptance and awareness is really being able to admit wrongdoing and let the investigation take its course. So that needs to happen in China as well.
Yeah, the thing is, and if we compare the cruise accident where the car dragged the pedestrian for I don't know how far, this accident with Baidu is because the scooter ran a red light. So it's not Baidu's fault, right? So you compare and see what kind of consequences. The consequence for cruise is they've stopped everything. And it's not going to happen for Baidu, certainly, that everything is stopped.
But there could be an argument made that that's part of an autonomous vehicle, robotaxi's remit, is to be able to react.
Avoid.
Yes.
Yeah, avoid accidents.
Period. So, full stop. Not 90% avoid, not 95% avoid, but avoid all of them. And so this just goes back to, we know it's not something that's going to happen, or it's not something that's around the corner. Robotaxis are going to be ubiquitous. There's going to be long tail for a lot of these use cases. Now, will certain use cases in certain areas and certain cities adopt robotaxis sooner than others? Yes, they will. But a lot of times that's going to be certain test areas that are designated. Yeah, good, for instance, is Yizhuang in Beijing. So let me check my newsletter. You had written We Ride, you'd written The Pony. And anything worth mentioning?
We've done this in Yizhuang. We've done this in Shenzhen, fully driverless, right?
But in your recent rides,
those are with the safety drivers.
Anything worth talking about?
I think it was interesting to compare a passenger sitting in the back seat, the comfort level. That's why I ranked Pony first, We Ride second, and surprisingly, Baidu last in that metric, the comfortability, the jerkiness. And then the other one was very interesting is how the AVs go through the ETC lane. Baidu did pretty poor.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and the latest Pony, so 4 times, it was very smooth. And you think about it, like, is it simple or is it difficult, that scenario of going through an ETC lane? Theoretically, it shouldn't be that difficult, right? Because you see, the bars come up and you should go, right? And then also going into the ETC lane because you don't have the lane markings. So a decision to pick which lane to go, right? And knowing it's an ETC lane.
But to me, that's how the software is defined and how aggressive it's going to be. I think Baidu, by nature, maybe had it being very, very careful, whereas Pony probably said, you know what, just drive like you normally would, like a normal human would.
Yeah, but at the same time, all of them strictly abide by the speed limits. And that's not how a normal human driver drives.
Sure.
Sometimes we go a little bit over, thinking it'll be okay. If it's 60, I'll probably drive 70, but it's strictly under the speed limit. So, and sometimes that can cause congestion or cause traffic issues. Because let's say you're in a lane, I think there was a video of a robotaxi, I think it was Baidu, trying to merge into the right, but the right lane is packed with traffic, then it's just stuck there, right? Causing traffic.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I mean.
So that's all I had, Lei. I know there's a couple people in the room, so I'll open it up to questions if anyone has any questions. We'll give a few seconds for that. If not, unless you have anything else.
No, I'm good. I'm good, man.
Now, when are you going to be in country in China watching the Euro Cup final, Euro 2020?
Yeah. So it'll be 3 a.m. on Monday morning, and I leave Monday night.
Oh, okay.
So I'll get in midnight Monday night U.S. time.
Do you have some crazy transfers?
No, it's JFK.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
And I got to drive 3 hours back.
Oh, two. That's right. So
I'll probably get in the wee hours.
Your wife is probably not that excited about going back, huh?
No, not at all. So, they don't want to leave. I don't want to leave.
So, oh man. But I haven't heard you complain about how hot it is. Has it been really hot?
It's been hot, but it's been rainy yesterday. Okay. I guess the only other thing I want to mention, maybe I had a few opportunities to check out the Qin L DMI. I test drove the top version, which retails at $139,800. It's good. It's not a Qin, the original Qin that I knew, the very first Qin that came out, like I don't know how many years ago. It's great car, right? For that price range.
Sure.
And then I got to check out the Envo. They had like 24 fellows, quite a few of which are NIO owners. And they're very enthusiastic explaining to you, what Envo is all about, specs, design. And check out that Hobson one. There's this I tweeted a video of I don't know, 24 brands basic on the same level. It's like a carousel, right? A carousel where there's 5 or 6 in that circle, brands in that circle, and then 3 or 4 cars in each of the, little pop-ups. And it's difficult to see them as cars, more of electronic toys, as I treat it. When everything is put under one roof,
it's hard to stand out.
It's hard to stand out. And I saw the ID Unix, which is being launched next week. I think it's probably in the 200,000 RMB range. The Volkswagen Anhui Cupra Tavascan sister model.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know how it's going to do, but...
Yeah, dude.
And
still a lot. So last night I had a little networking event for alumni, talked to a lot of Ford people. And so interesting to hear their perspectives on how the company's doing. And, not surprised that they understand what's going on in China, but not really. But anyways, hey, everyone, thanks for listening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Apologies for the mishap this morning.
Yeah. So I mean, this is like the first technical issue that we had to.
Yeah, that's a good streak. That's over 3 years, right? So
170 some episodes or something.
So yeah. Anyways, everyone, thanks for joining us, and we will talk with you all next week.
Yep, same here. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu and Lei, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.